of the night for Penn State football in their dominating win over Indiana was the defense. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. This is the BWI Daily Edition, and we're not going to talk about that today because we're going to cover that extensively in several different areas today at Blue White Illustrated. So if you want that, first off, the film review of Penn State, Indiana coming up today at bluewhiteillustrated.com. So check that out when it comes up. Also, we will have the BWI Live show on Monday. So if you're listening to the podcast version of this and you haven't seen that yet, we'll have a podcast version of that. And of course, we'll have it live on YouTube at noon. We hope you join us as myself, Dave Eckert, Nate Bauer break down Penn State, Indiana, both sides of the ball. We'll give you all the information there. But today I want to specifically focus on Sean Clifford. And this is going to be showing Sean Clifford's improvement from the past to this year. Because now we have a 5-game sample size to compare and contrast to who he was previously as a starter to see, 1, the effect of Mike Yurcich, and 2, his improvement in general as a player. Now, this is coming off his worst statistical output of the season, his worst performance down of the season, and I think that even with that, you'll see he's a much improved player from 2019. And the numbers here are going to show you, ignore 2020. And I'll get into one of the reasons why, amongst many, and it's going to be specifically from an on-field perspective, because the off-field perspective, we've talked about that so much. Like, you are aware, and if you aren't, check out the BWI Daily Edition. We've got all of them saved on YouTube and on podcast. So you can find that information on your own. We're not going to rehash it today. We're going to compare Sean Clifford to his first season starting to now in his third year, but his second real attempt at starting. And I think there are some really interesting insights into how Mike Yurcich is operating this offense as compared to Ricky Rahne and kind of the circumstances that go into both. And one of the first things that you're going to see is that Sean Clifford is much better as a passer under pressure. And when he's not under pressure. In general, I think this shows the development best. As far as when he's under pressure, he is not making huge mistakes. So far, when there is pressure in his face, either from a blitz or just a clean win by the defense, he has one turnover-worthy play. You know which one it is. It's the interception that he threw last Saturday against Indiana. He had 7 of those in 2019. So already a much improved Sean Clifford from that aspect. Also, because of that, the passer rating has improved significantly to almost average. Like, the average passer rating is about 98, I want to say. 95, somewhere in there. So his passer rating under pressure so far this season is almost just average for a quarterback. Not considering the pressure. That is that's above acceptable. That's good. That's not great. That's not winning at a high level, but that's above average. Also, and the area that I think is the most important is his clean pocket completion percentage. This is when everything's ideal. How is he performing? And this is the biggest change in Sean Clifford from 2019 to 2021 is that he is much more efficient when he's kept clean. He's when the offense is operating for him, he is operating it successfully. Now, that is the maturity that you get from a fifth-year player and a guy that is now, I think, more comfortable with what he's seeing. Now, this is one area where this took a little bit of a step backwards last week because Indiana does some really different and special things schematically that other teams just don't do. So some of those numbers are down from the previous 4 weeks, but they're still way better than they were in 2019. So that's really important to know is that there are still ups and downs and there are still teams and players and situations that Sean Clifford hasn't conquered yet, but good enough to win, especially with a team and a defense that is very, very good. Now, here's another interesting aspect to compare what Mike Yurcich has done as opposed to Ricky Rahne in the first year starting for Sean Clifford, where it actually was a lot was on his shoulders as far as delivering big plays. On play action, again, much more efficient. His completion percentage is up significantly, and part of that is because he's throwing shorter, quicker passes. Now, this says two things about the two offenses. First off, if you remember back in 2019, it was a run-heavy offense that featured Journey Brown and Noah Cain. They emerged as the season went on as the engine of the offense. They were the reason Penn State was explosive. And because of that, teams loaded up the box, and a first-year starting quarterback, they're going to make you prove that you can beat them. So it was a lot of play action, deep shots, low efficiency but high reward sort of passing. Now, the results are about even as far as how Sean Clifford has operated that, but from an efficiency standpoint and not necessarily from a big play standpoint, he is much better at taking those underneath plays, and Mike Yurcich is designing easier throws for him as compared to the bombs away approach that Ricky Rahne had in 2019. Again, different team, and now Sean Clifford has come into his own as a quarterback, and teams are saying, okay, we're going to play coverage. Most teams so far this year, even Indiana, presented with two deep safeties. They don't want to allow the big play to Jahan Dotson. That's been the narrative, is can Sean Clifford efficiently dink and dunk his way down the field? And the answer so far has been yes. Penn State has a significant increase in the number of 10-play drives, of 9-play drives. And that is largely due to the play calling of Mike Yurcich, who's being patient himself, and Sean Clifford in the implementation of that, which I think is also really important, is that those two are working well together. And that is showing to me a maturity and a growth not only in the accuracy and the decision-making, but also in just the patience of a quarterback who, in his fifth year, if you think that this offense isn't taking what the defense is giving them, they are. They are. Now, this is going to get into another area where you can't just take what the defense is giving you, because there's a reason they're giving it to you, because they don't want you to take something else. So this is the one area that I think is really important, is that because I've harped on this show, doesn't mean it's not better. Sean Clifford has become a better deep passer. Again, because of the type of passes he's throwing and the guy that's designing them, he has a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio on deep passes. His efficiency, even in this area where he's hitting about 32% of his passes, has improved. On deep passes, you're not going to hit them all. If you are, you're going to the NFL. And Sean Clifford is a good quarterback, but I think we've seen clearly that this is an area where he is good and he is efficient, but he is not elite. But it is improved. He had a 2-to-1 ratio on interceptions on deep passes in 2019. So this is a significant improvement of taking, even on deep passes, taking what the defense is giving you. Also, big time throws from PFF. This is a throw where you're generating the offense, essentially. It's not a busted coverage. It's not the receiver won so well that you don't get credit for it. He is the reason, with good passes that are on the money into good coverage, he's already on pace to shatter what he did in 2019, where, again, a lot of that was the running game was leading the team. He is now a significant driver of the offense, and this is a huge change. This is what I've been trying to say about this team, that Sean Clifford is now operating at a point where he's contributing to the offense as a positive influence. That was not the case in 2019, and certainly wasn't in 2020, and that is, to me, the biggest change, and we will get into that now, of what was wrong with the offense last year. Everything was condensed and shrunk, and part of it was the decisions of the offensive coordinator and how the plays were designed. I talked about this preseason, and we're going to get into something that I brought up as far as a fair comparison for what you should expect from Sean Clifford this season as a passer. This is what he did in 2020 and what he was given to work with. Total percentage of deep passes last season was under 10%. So the defense knew they're not throwing it deep. They don't want to test. They don't want to test the offensive line. They don't want to test the quarterback. They don't want to test the receivers. So everything was underneath. And when you do that, just go rewatch the Indiana film of last week and what Penn State did to them as a team. That's what you can do if you don't respect a team's deep passing attack. You can load up the box to stop the run. You can play within a 5-yard cushion, and you can jump every single route. The ease of the targets as well is, to me, a big part of what Sean Clifford was working with last season. If you're throwing to the center of the field in college football, typically it means the guy is open. And that's just it doesn't always mean that. Sometimes you're throwing into a good look, but a player makes a play, something like that. But for the most part, if you're throwing to the center of the field, there's not a safety there. Most teams play what's called cover 3, and they keep a guy in the middle of the field, or they play cover 4, where they have guys closer to the center of the field, so you can't get these completions where you have latitude to miss left or right. Last season, everything that Sean Clifford threw was to the outside. It was go balls, 9 routes, everything that is just on the sideline with a defender pushing the receiver into a small box. This year, Sean Clifford already has shattered his attempts and his completions to the middle of the field, which means Mike Yurcich is dialing up better plays. These are shots, and these are the ones you remember. Jahan Dotson running open over the middle of the field against Wisconsin. Parker Washington getting single coverage against Villanova and beating it and getting downfield. These plays help the quarterback. And that's really, I think, the biggest thing about this season so far is the offense is helping the quarterback. And you can see, even though it's the one area where he's struggled a little bit to be more consistent, he's still a viable starting quarterback. 32% completion percentage on deep passes it's acceptable. It's keeping the defense from being able to do whatever they want, and that is what he's doing so far. The reason I've talked so much about that is because that's the next step. That's the last piece where Sean Clifford goes from efficient game-managing quarterback to guy that wins you games, guy that is the engine driving everything. And they've been in fits and starts, but you can see it is better this season. And if it can continue to improve incrementally, Penn State, their offense becomes an explosive, I don't want to say juggernaut, but, close to that. Something that is very hard to defend for any team that they face, no matter the talent. They've got the receiving skill to do that, and they've got the offensive play caller to make it happen. And this is something I want to bring up again. I talked about this this offseason as far as what you could expect from Sean Clifford as far as his output. And everything we just saw, as far as his deep completion percentage, his targets, where they are on the field, this is what Sam Ehlinger did last season in 2020. Now, we already covered what Sean Clifford did and was working with in 2020, but look over here on the right, to the deep center of the field. It's what we just talked about. The number of attempts to the middle of the field, Sean Clifford is already on pace to match what Sam Ehlinger did last season. His completion percentage to that area, his completion percentage deep, the percentage of deep targets, they are all on pace to be exactly what Sam Ehlinger did, and in some areas, a little bit better. His completion percentage deep last season, Sam Ehlinger, is about 3 points lower than what Sean Clifford is doing right now. And if that's the area that Sean Clifford is still working on, this is an offense that can then work. The Texas offense last season worked, and it was effective enough to win them a good number of games, and Sam Ehlinger was an effective college quarterback. That is what Mike Yurcich is doing with Sean Clifford, and that is what Sean Clifford is doing in this offense. He's operating it to a good degree. Now, there's one last area that I want to point out, and it's something that is, I think, a change even for Mike Yurcich. We've focused a lot on the deep passes, mostly because that was the 5-alarm fire from last season. But the ease of passes, going back to the idea of the play action and making things easier for Sean Clifford, a large number of his targets are around the line of scrimmage, either behind on the bubble screens or in that 5-yard area. That is a change even for Mike Yurcich, who is, with this quarterback, with his reputation as a guy that wants to design and take shots downfield. That's how teams are playing Penn State now. They are playing 2 deep safeties. They're playing a lot of coverage and saying, take the underneath stuff. We don't want you to get the big shot, so we're going to take you 9, 10, 12 plays. And so far, Penn State has been able to do that. So this offense is making judicious use of all parts of the field. And that right there, Penn State fans, is why you should be excited about this team, is because they're operating everything pretty darn well, and things can improve in the areas where they are not. That's one area that I think, if you want to project this going forward, yes, there are tougher defenses coming up. There are players and there are skill position defensive backs that can make big plays. But it's not like Penn State is operating from behind the eight ball. You can see that Sean Clifford has definitively taken a step forward in 2021. That'll do it today for the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. If you want more stuff like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you subscribe. We will be back here later today as of recording, because we have the BWI live show coming up at noon. So if you're listening to this after the fact, you can also get that wherever you get your podcasts. We will talk to you then.